they're aware that this is really, really hard what the entrepreneurs are doing, and it shouldn't all be working. In fact, some would say that if everything's working, they're not trying enough things, they're not going fast enough, right? Great ones have a way of pulling the future forward, right, is a term that you'll hear. And what that means is they're usually pitching something that sounds a little bit silly on face value, and those usually tend to be the best ideas across social media about how much money they've raised, and that is not the goal. The goal is to build a great business, and raising money is most oftentimes en route to building that great business. VC office hours, trying something new for you all. There have been some questions that I've been getting in person, in the comment sections on YouTube, and some of the DMs across Instagram and other things, just people asking my perspective, my opinion on different things in the VC world, or whether they be aspiring entrepreneurs, maybe they're building, that kind of thing. And so I thought I'd take some time today, a little bit of a slow recording week here given the holiday, and go through some of these and give some answers and my thoughts. So if you guys enjoy this, feel free to leave some of your own questions in the comments. Hit us up on Instagram, that kind of thing. Let us know what you're thinking about. Happy to answer any questions you guys might have. So first and foremost, question number one: if I'm building an AI startup today, what actually constitutes a defensible moat? Data, distribution, or something else? This is an interesting question. I wish that I had kind of a very specific answer. Unfortunately, it kind of depends on the industry and exactly what vertical you might be going after, that kind of thing. As a default, I would say distribution. The fact of the matter is it's never been easier to build, and the prototyping and product iteration speed are simply the highest I've ever seen. And so what really matters is, how do you capture attention? How do you get users to try things? How do you get users to give you feedback, whether that's directly via surveys or something else, or whether it's actually just through using the product and the data you can collect that way? And attention seems to be the currency that is mattering the most, especially in consumer AI, but that's also true in kind of B2B AI SaaS as well. Number two, how do you decide whether a fast-growing startup burning cash is healthy, aggressive, or recklessly scaling? Typically, you don't know. You don't know until after the fact. So there's kind of an interesting, I think, debate going on right now around whether or not OpenAI specifically can hit some of its hyperscale growth targets. It seems to be committing capital that it simply doesn't have. It's going to be in this kind of raise, burn, raise cycle for a while. And the truth of the matter is, you don't know. The kind of the perspective that I would give is, for hyperscaling companies, typically it's grow or die. Is kind of the unfortunate reality. And if OpenAI, as an example, can't outpace Google, which Google has been taking some strides in the recent weeks and months on their AI product, most notably Gemini, but also VO3, there's things going on with Nano Banana, et cetera. And if OpenAI can't catch up, then they're in all likelihood going to get squashed regardless. So in some ways, it's grow or die, and you just have to live with the result. You can never be certain on kind of one or the other. Number three, what signals tell you a founder is truly exceptional, even if the metrics are early? This one's hard. I mean, I think qualitatively, some kind of rule of thumb that I typically use, or that we typically use internally, is, can this be the next Mark Zuckerberg? And independent of whether or not you like Zuck, the fact of the matter is, he's one of the most exceptional entrepreneurs we've ever seen, built one of the best businesses. I mean, Elon Musk would be another person that you might model that after. You can alert to typical signals, where they went to school, who's in their professional network, what have they built before, right? Is this a second startup? Is this their third startup? Have they had successful exits? That kind of thing. What have they done that's really hard? Sometimes we get founders that are math Olympiad medalists, they're chess champions, or these kind of things that make them stand out. They're prior athletes, or they're prior military service members, that kind of thing. That kind of set them apart from who the sea of otherwise very worthy entrepreneurs. But it's hard, and sometimes it's a qualitative judgment more than it is any kind of quantitative fact that you can kind of optimize for. The other thing I will share is Sequoia, who is, by some metrics, kind of the most successful VC firm kind of ever, has a 2x2 grid that they've published on kind of founders, and the things that they're optimizing or looking for are exceptional and hard to work with. And that makes kind of sound counterintuitive, but if the founders themselves aren't somewhat hard to work with, or they don't tend to break down the doors that are necessary to be broken down in order to build a really successful startup. And remember, this is looking at things through a VC lens when we're talking about trying to build companies into the billions and tens of billions, hundreds of billions, even trillions of dollars. This is not applicable to lifestyle businesses or people doing kind of side hustles, that kind of thing. Question number 4: how much should early stage founders think about valuation versus picking the right partners? It's a great question. The mistake that founders often make is too high a valuation. The right partners can be important. Surrounding yourself with quality talent is always kind of the goal of a startup. In the earliest days of startups, this is not specific to valuation, but it's just simply true. It's a game of collecting resources. Those resources include revenue, they include talented employees, and they include talented advisors and or investors. And so you need to be attractive, given the very specifics of your company, for the most talented people in the world in whatever domains you're targeting to want to join you. And that means join you as employees, as co-founders, as investors. And so valuation is one of the things that you can either make attractive or less attractive depending on that particular set of circumstances. Number 5, what's one myth about venture funding you wish first-time founders would unlearn? Yeah, the biggest myth, the most common myth, is that raising venture capital is not the goal. The goal is to build a great company, and raising venture capital dollars is a way to do that. It's not the only way. It is the most common way to build the largest companies in the world. So, in many ways, the best founders look at their relationships with venture capitalists as partnerships. They're trying to attract the right venture capitalists at the right valuation, such that those venture capitalists can be true value adds to them building a great company. But far too often, you'll hear founders, kind of boasting or posting across social media about how much money they've raised, and that is not the goal. The goal is to build a great business, and raising money is most oftentimes en route to building that great business. So don't over-index on kind of the success or failure of the fundraise. Just remember to keep in mind that building the business is the primary and the only goal that really matters. Number 6, how do I know if I'm ready to raise? What are the minimum viable proof points? Another great question. It depends on the industry. Something like hard tech, think about robotics, think about drones, think about defense tech, think about healthcare, think about new drugs, that kind of thing. Those are going to have longer revenue ramps, so longer timelines until you actually get to first revenue, and then longer times to climb in revenue typically. So comparing that to something like AI SaaS or something like that, where it has a very fast revenue ramp, very early times to revenue. Those two things need to be, I think, thoughtfully compared. The reality is you're ready to raise when you think you're ready to raise and when you can raise. And so, again, that depends on the industry that you're in. It depends on the particular circumstances around your business. It depends on the kind of products that you're going after. I would say before you even get to the question of whether you're ready to raise or not, I think you should be seriously evaluating if raising is the right choice for you. Is this a business that can sustain venture style returns? Are venture capitalists the right group to be raising from? How much do you need to raise? Why do you need to raise right now? Can you bootstrap? Can you answer some of the questions? Can you significantly de-risk without a raise? All those are questions that kind of need to be thought about en route to raising. I will share, just with the perspective of anybody building AI apps, A16Z, Andreessen Horowitz put out kind of their benchmarks, if you will, for revenue. And anecdotally, we've seen similar trends where an AI company that is hyper competitive in the kind of investing landscape right now has roughly $500,000 in revenue in the first 6-ish months. And then that goes up to about $1 million in the first 12 months. That's a ballpark number. Obviously, there are no hard and fast rules. We see companies that have less than that get funded all the time. We see companies with more than that not get funded. So just kind of as a general ballpark there, those are some numbers to keep kind of top of mind. Number 7, what do investors really mean when they say they're soft circled, and how much does it actually matter? Soft circling is just a term that's used that is an expression of commitment before there's actually been any paperwork finalized or any documents signed. Soft circling is usually language that is kind of connected to a syndication of a round, when you're kind of trying to collect investors beyond the lead investor, when you're trying to go to 2, 3, 4, 5 investors in a group. And then soft circling basically is just an expression of interest that enables the founder or the entrepreneur to kind of go out and share this is how much money they think they will be able to raise pending some inflection point, formalization of the fundraising documents, acquiring of the lead and definition of terms, etc. Number 8, what are the biggest mistakes you see founders make in their first investor update? This is a great question. So for those that may be unfamiliar, typically when a company has raised venture capital funding every month, every quarter, depending on the relationship, depending on the size of the company and the speed at which they're operating, they will send what's called an investor update. Sometimes this is an email, bullet point list of what's going on in the company. Sometimes it's a formalized document or a write-up or a memo or something like that. In any event, no matter what form it takes, the thing that I see founders get wrong the most is they don't share the learnings, particularly as it pertains to the things that aren't working in their company. So venture capitalists, investors of all kinds, especially in the private markets, if they're any good at all, they're aware that this is really, really hard what the entrepreneurs are doing, and it shouldn't all be working. In fact, some would say that if everything's working, they're not trying enough things, they're not going fast enough, right? And so as an investor, I want to see what is working, why the entrepreneur has confidence that those things that are working are going to continue to work, and what isn't working, and what experiments they're running, or what kind of thought they're giving around how to rectify those things, or if they need rectifying. Sometimes it's simply, we tried this, it didn't work, and we've abandoned it for X, Y, and Z. All that's a perfectly reasonable thing, but I would say, everybody kind of wants to highlight what's working, and that's perfectly fine. I would say, somewhere between 75% and somewhere 75 to 25% of the split, 75% of what is working, 25% of what's not working, 80-20, that kind of thing is very reasonable. You don't want to be alarmist to the investors, but you do want to be transparent, and you want to be clear about, hey, these are the things that maybe aren't working quite as well as we had hoped, or maybe that we thought, and here's why we're changing course, or here are the things that we're trying. Okay, number 9. We got 4 more here. So number 9, these are a little bit. Be honest. How often do VCs actually read the full data room, and what's the equivalent of skimming for the plot? So I don't know any VCs that won't have a team at least look through the entire data room, and maybe that's just because of the VCs that we're kind of most often working most closely with. I can speak personally, and for kind of the way that we operate, we do read every kind of document, or whether it be a spreadsheet or whatever. We do read the entire thing. The skimming for the plot, I don't exactly know what this person is asking, but the best I can tell, that would be kind of what happens during the actual pitch calls themselves. Usually in the pitch call, for kind of a trained ear, a VC kind of makes a preliminary determination within kind of 5-ish minutes. You usually get a pretty good sense of how smart is the founder, how capable do they seem in their particular domain that they've chosen, what's the traction like, what are the signals that are both positive and negative around this. The thing that's very, very hard to judge in the meeting, and this doesn't come through in the data room either, is determination. What's going to happen when all of a sudden this isn't working very well? How hard is this person going to work when things aren't as good as they appear to be kind of in this initial meeting, that kind of thing. If pitch decks were judged like Olympic gymnastics, what are the secret deduction no one talks about? These are some incredibly creative questions. Secret deductions no one talks about. I think, in truth, founders probably spend too much time on the deck, making sure every pixel is in the right place, making sure every kind of graphic is well done. Hiring consulting, do not hire a consulting firm to make your pitch deck. If you're a founder and you are running a business and you can't yourself make the pitch deck, there are larger problems than how good your deck looks. So do not outsource the making of the deck. Later stage, maybe. I don't really like to see it ever, but always exceptions to the rule. But in any event, if the business is good, the deck doesn't matter that much. Right? We've seen people raise with no deck. We've seen people raise with the most elaborate decks in the world that look like they've been put together, after consulting $300K checks to the kind of big four. Yeah, I don't know. Secret deductions, we don't really focus on the pitch that much. I mean, obviously we do, but as far as the deck or something like that, it becomes kind of probably secondary or even tertiary to the founders themselves, the traction of the business, how good the actual business is. The deck, is something I actually think YC did a really good job of pioneering this, or at least leading the kind of change. I think historically, before I was doing this, and kind of prior to any and all consciousness I have of the space, is it used to really matter how good the deck was, right? Because you were sharing these things. These things were being read before the kind of investment committee meetings, et cetera. Now everything is kind of so digitized, and everything is kind of on social media or otherwise, that the deck probably doesn't carry as much weight as it maybe used to. All right, last one for the day. What's the funniest and wildest pitch you ever heard? Changing details to protect the companies and founders. We get some that are comically bad. Companies that come in and are pitching an idea that probably doesn't deserve venture investment, and that's not because the business idea is bad or anything. It's just because the founders don't really understand kind of the game they're playing when they walk into an investor meeting, or they just don't understand that the business that they're building isn't a good fit for kind of the venture model, right? It doesn't necessarily promise 10x or more returns. You can't necessarily build a large business to have outside participation for other investors. That's not to say that they're not great businesses or that those aren't great entrepreneurs. They very much are usually, but that they're just building a business that doesn't fall under the model of kind of VC standard. We've heard some incredibly ambitious ones. Those are always the most fun. I wouldn't necessarily call that the funniest nor the wildest, but entrepreneurs, especially the great ones, have a way of pulling the future forward, right? Is a term that you'll hear. And what that means is they're usually pitching something that sounds a little bit silly on face value, and those usually tend to be the best ideas. What you're looking for when you're making these bets is contrarian and correct. If the founder or the entrepreneur is pitching something that feels obvious or that feels in line with the broader consensus, there probably isn't that much alpha, or there isn't that much opportunity to actually make a return there. However, if you're hearing something that is super contrarian, kind of the traditional zag to the current zig, if you will, with what you deem to be a high probability of being right, that is where the most money can actually be made. Those are the most interesting opportunities. So, SpaceX would be kind of a classic example of this, right? To be able to launch a rocket, catch it, be able to reuse it, that kind of thing. Like when that idea would have been pitched, multiple decades ago, 20 years ago, that would have been wild, right? And for any VC, they would have had to take a leap of faith that, that was going to happen before it actually happened. Autonomous robots, similarly, I think there are these things that, sound, again, wild or maybe even foolish on first pass. But a VC's job is to think about, what if the entrepreneur is right? What if the vision of the future that they're painting is actually one that comes to fruition? What's the outcome then? Right. Just as a reminder here and in closing, entrepreneurship is a failure sport. Most startup companies do not make it. Most startup companies do not make it out of the first 2 years. That's baked in, both for the entrepreneur and for the VC or investor. And so it's not productive to think about what happens if this doesn't work. We all know what happens if it doesn't work. This thing goes to zero, and all the money that gets invested is lost. That's a perfectly well understood outcome, and in fact, that's modeled for in kind of the venture math that firms are doing. What people don't spend enough time on, and what is absolutely essential to be either an entrepreneur or an investor in this space, is kind of the optimistic lens of what happens if it goes right. And if it goes right and it's big, those are the opportunities that both entrepreneurs and VCs should be biasing for. And with that, we're going to close. So a quick reminder to get your questions in. If you guys have questions on this topic, especially as it pertains to VC and kind of ventures that would be VC backable, shoot those through. Happy to answer those. We'll probably be doing this maybe once a month, maybe a couple times a month, depending on how many questions we get in. But thanks to everybody that sent these questions through. Had a lot of fun with this, and see everybody next time.